This is Clemente Aguirre, sentenced to death for a double murder he didn't commit in Florida. Aguirre was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, a capital offense in Florida, based primarily on circumstantial evidence and his undocumented status.
Nobody believed me back then. No one. Besides my mother, nobody believed me.
In many wrongful convictions, defendants lack support, legal resources, and credibility, especially undocumented immigrants.
14 years ago, Aguirre lived just a few doors down when a mother and daughter were killed. Soon,
Proximity often leads to suspicion, but it's not direct evidence of guilt.
Aguirre became the prime suspect. Reportedly, he went to the woman's house that night asking for beer, and here he found the dead bodies. He tried to revive the woman, but then panicked and ran home.
Aguirre's presence at the scene and panic led to misinterpretation of his actions as guilt, despite no intent to harm.
He stated he didn't call the police because he was an illegal immigrant from Honduras and feared deportation.
This shows how immigration status can influence behavior in emergencies, which can be wrongly used as evidence of guilt.
He was arrested and later convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and given the death sentence.
I didn't do it. I don't kill nobody.
After Aguirre
Capital convictions require overwhelming evidence, yet Aguirre's case lacked forensic proof tying him directly to the murders.
was escorted out of the courtroom, it wouldn't be until 9 years later evidence showed that the DNA might have been misrepresented. So Aguirre's lawyers filed for more testing. It turns out that all of Aguirre's DNA samples matched his testimony, meaning that his DNA on the scene matched with him trying to save the victims. After
Post-conviction DNA testing proved his blood at the scene aligned with his version. Attempts to help, not harm.
14 years behind bars, 11 of which on death row, all charges against Aguirre are dropped, and
The court vacated the conviction after conclusive exculpatory evidence was uncovered.
he thanks the court.
And I thank you for it. From the bottom of my heart.
As he hugs his team and family, he is now walking out a free man. Reportedly, Aguirre is owed $720,000 from the state for the wrongful conviction. However, state lawyers are fighting against it, and so far, he has
Florida law requires specific criteria to be met for compensation. His immigration status and non-actual innocence ruling could be factors.
hasn't received anything. His immigration status is also ongoing.
This is Deborah Milk, sentenced to death for her son's murder in Arizona.
Crime she did not commit in Phoenix, Arizona.
My innocence did not matter in their pursuit of a conviction.
She was convicted of first-degree murder based solely on an alleged unrecorded confession.
Melky's 4-year-old son was found dead in a desert, being shot 3 times. Melky was questioned by Detective Armando Saldate Jr., which was not recorded or reported at all. He claimed that Melky admitted to arranging the murder.
She then decided that it'd be best for Christopher Melky to die.
Detective claimed she confessed but didn't record it. This violates best practices. Confessions should be documented to ensure due process.
She was then charged with first-degree murder despite no actual record of her admitting to the crime.
No forensic evidence linked her to the crime.
The state determined she had masterminded the shooting and she was sentenced to death.
Her conviction hinged on hearsay, normally inadmissible without corroboration.
20 years later, questions started to get asked regarding Melky's confession to Detective Saldate, which Melky still denies ever giving.
I had absolutely nothing to do with the brutal murder of my son, Christopher, and I did not give a confession to Mr. Saldate.
Reportedly, the court found that Detective Saldate had a long list of lying under oath and violating individual rights while interrogating. Melky's alleged
Prior instances of lying under oath by the officer raised Brady violation concerns. Exculpatory evidence not disclosed.
confession was the only direct evidence linking her to the crime. And finally, 24 years after the arrest and facing the death sentence, her conviction
overturned after 22 years?
Her thoughts for the wrongful conviction.
Losing a child to murder is a devastating tragedy. Being falsely accused of a crime you didn't commit is also a devastating tragedy. Try to imagine that. What happened to me could happen to any one of you.
Milky
The court found that the conviction was legally unsound due to prosecutorial and police misconduct.
now walks out a free woman. There are no reports of Melky receiving.
Arizona's compensation law is narrow. Milka would have to prove actual innocence and apply through a civil claim.
This is Clifford Williams. He was sentenced to death and spent 43 years behind bars for crimes
Williams and his nephew Myers were imprisoned for a shooting they didn't commit.
he did not commit in Jacksonville, Florida.
I just wanted to get out and be with my 6 kids. They was gone and it wasn't nobody but them.
Williams was 34, and his 18-year-old nephew, Nathan Myers, were suspects in a murder and attempted murder. The survivor of the shooting claimed that she had been shot by the uncle and nephew, identifying them both by name.
Convicted despite no physical evidence, conviction relied entirely on a single eyewitness.
Despite having solid alibis, Williams and Myers were both arrested and charged within hours. No physical or DNA evidence pinned the two men to this crime, yet both men were found guilty.
Eyewitness misidentification is one of the leading causes of wrongful convictions.
Williams was sentenced to death and Myers was given a life sentence. It wasn't until 43 years later, while they were in prison, there was a new investigation on the scene.
Ballistics later disproved the witness story.
Didn't match the original testimony, and it was the only evidence pinning the men to this crime. And now,
the new forensic evidence was grounds for a post-conviction relief motion.
This is the moment that Williams and Myers have been waiting for 43 years.
Mr. Williams and Mr. Myers, the indictments have been dismissed against you. You are free to go, and we are adjourned.
Released after 43 years.
After they hear that they are free, they hug each other and their team.
Their convictions were vacated based on newly discovered evidence undermining the sole basis for the verdict.
Williams and Myers both received $2 million in state compensation.
Under Florida's compensation law, exonerees can receive $50,000 per year of wrongful incarceration.
This is Eric Kelly, who was sentenced to life in prison for a robbery and murder he did not commit in
Kelly, cognitively impaired, was pressured into a false confession.
Passaic County, New Jersey. Kelly was 28 when he was taken into custody after a man was killed working at a video store. Kelly suffered a tragic brain injury, making him suffer a cognitive disability, and he had trouble processing information from detectives and allegedly admitted to the crime, even though he had not done it. Despite no physical
interrogation tactics can violate rights when used on vulnerable individuals.
Evidence, he was convicted and put in prison. It wouldn't be until
no physical evidence, yet still convicted.
24 years later, the case was reopened, and major advancements in DNA testing proved that Kelly was not at the crime scene. Therefore,
convictions without physical evidence often fail under modern legal scrutiny, especially with new DNA testing.
In light of the foregoing reasons, the motion for a new trial is hereby granted.
A new trial was granted, and Kelly is now outside of
released after 24 years.
Prison for the first time in almost a quarter century, still with the fear he might go back.
Mainly I want to eat. I'm a little hungry. My legal team, I want to thank them. I want to thank my family. Just want to get back to actually living for once.
Surprisingly, the prosecution later dismissed all pending charges against him. Kelly reportedly received $1 million in state.
His conviction was overturned based on newly discovered DNA excluding him from the crime scene. New Jersey provides civil compensation for proven wrongful convictions based on exonerating evidence.
This is Robert Springsteen, who spent 9 years in prison and was sentenced to death for crimes he allegedly
Springsteen was convicted based on a coerced confession from a friend.
Did not commit in Austin, Texas. Springsteen was 17 at the time, and 3 friends were believed to be prime suspects in the killings of 4 teenage girls at a yogurt shop. One of the boys was caught carrying a .22 caliber gun at the mall, as it was the same weapon used in the killings. The boys were set free after no link was found, but 7 years later, one of the friends was interrogated and begun to give up information saying that the .22 caliber gun used to belong to Springsteen.
But this is one of the most significant things that ever happened in your life. That's what I keep trying to explain to you. If I was there and I partook in this, I would remember these things. And you do remember these things. No, I don't.
He was arrested.
Uncorroborated co-defendant statements are weak evidence and may violate the Confrontation Clause.
Then later convicted and sentenced to death. Springsteen's conviction was later overturned based on an unfair trial. While waiting for
DNA evidence later exonerated all suspects.
For a retrial, lawyers requested further DNA evidence to be analyzed from the original crime scene. Even though it had been 17 years, the analysts concluded that no DNA was found of Springsteen and his 3 friends. Now, Springsteen is back in court.
Second defendant, Robert Springsteen's case is being called this afternoon. Additionally, 4 pending capital murder indictments.
And all charges are now dismissed.
The court has signed these dismissals in each of the causes against these 2 defendants, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen.
Springsteen sits silently as he hears that
the lack of matching DNA raised reasonable doubt, invalidating the conviction.
He is now a free man. Springsteen spent 9 years in prison, but his overturned
Texas requires a declaration of actual innocence for compensation. His case didn't meet that threshold.
This is Curtis Flowers, who was wrongfully imprisoned for 23 years and set to the death penalty for a quadruple murder
Flowers faced 6 trials for the same crime.
he reportedly never committed in Winona, Mississippi. Flowers was 26 years old when he was fired from working at a furniture store. 2 weeks later, the owner of the same store and 3 employees were all found dead inside. In no time, Flowers became a suspect and was later arrested and charged with the murder of all 4 victims. Over 6 different trials, all for the same crime, the final verdict resulted in guilty, and Flowers was sentenced to death.
Repeated retrials can raise double jeopardy concerns, although technically allowed under U.S. law.
Investigators started looking into the jury selection, and reportedly the prosecution had racially discriminated during the selection of jurors across all 6 trials. This reached the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was voted to throw out the case based on the prosecutor had purposefully dismissed African American jurors from the trial. The
prosecution's exclusion of black jurors violated the Batson versus Kentucky ruling.
Granted Flowers bail, and he is now getting put on house arrest.
The only times that Mr. Flowers is allowed to be away from the location where he will be residing is if he's receiving medical treatment, attending meetings with his attorney.
And now, in 23 years, this is the first time Flowers is outside of prison.
He was eventually released.
I don't know. I'm so excited right now. I can't think straight. Thank you all very much. Thank you all. Thank you all.
A year later, the state denied to put Flowers back on trial and officially
After charges were dropped, he was free and eligible for compensation.
Dropped all charges. The state of Mississippi announced that it will pay Flowers $500,000 for his 23 years of wrongful imprisonment.
Mississippi provides up to $50,000 per year for wrongful imprisonment, capped at 10 years.
This is Kimberly Long, who was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison for a
convicted, despite being the one who found the body and called 911.
Murder she never committed in Riverside, California. Long arrived home and discovered her boyfriend dead. She immediately called 911. Despite being the person who found the dead body, Long ended up
First responders or callers are sometimes wrongly suspected without evidence.
Becoming the lead suspect. She was soon convicted of second-degree murder and sent to prison. But 7 years later, forensic evidence showed that her boyfriend died long before she had arrived at the scene, and there was DNA.
New forensic timeline proved her innocence.
DNA of an unknown male at the crime scene. The conviction now gets overturned.
The judgment of conviction is vacated and a new trial will be ordered.
This was grounds for a motion for new trial under California Penal Code, Paragraph 11473.
Long is now outside of prison.
Conviction overturned, charges dropped.
The prosecution soon dropped all existing charges.
I feel happy, elated, relieved, just a lot of emotions right now.
She was exonerated and eligible for state compensation.
Reportedly received $386,000 from the California Victim Compensation Fund.
California allows exonerees to receive $140 per day of wrongful imprisonment.